A lot of famous recipes are claimed to be made with love, but what's a dish that's probably made with hatred? My Year 8 cooking teacher, who was presumably rented from the Institute of British Stereotypes or something, suggested adding both Heinz baked beans and Marmite to the same lasagna to make it healthier. So, probably that. In Titus Andronicus, the play by Shakespeare, there is the famous pie from Wiki. When Tamora is gone, Titus has them restrained, cuts their throats and drains their blood into a basin held by Lavinia. Titus morbidly tells Lavinia that he plans to play the cook, grind the bones of Demetrius and Chiron into powder, and bake their heads. When the emperor calls for Chiron and Demetrius, Titus reveals that they have been baked in the pie Tamora has just been eating. Picture being 13 and horny all the time. Now picture a world where Wi-Fi doesn't exist. In the middle of the night you'd have to sneak out of your room and solid snake crawl on your stomach to the computer room trying to make as little noise as possible. You connect to the internet. Beep boop bop boop beep beep beep. A minute later you're connected. 5 minutes later you find something to jack off to. It's a picture of Cindy Crawford that took 2 minutes to download. You blast off, cover your tracks, and begin the long process of sneaking back to your room. The modern internet is kind of amazing. First time I saw someone take a selfie with a flip phone, there was only an outward-facing camera. You just had to aim it at yourself and hope for the best. Kids these days don't know how good they have it. When I was in college, I wanted to have How We Do as my ringtone, but I didn't want to pay for it, so I pulled up the song on YouTube and recorded a snippet and then used that as my ringtone. Nowadays I keep my phone on Do Not Disturb at all times and I haven't actually used the ringtone in a decade. MySpace wasn't as personal as Facebook, and all messages were like emails versus chat boxes. You had to check your inbox for messages, and most of the stuff you saw were bulletins your friends posted, most of which was chain mail and surveys that were copy-pasted. If you wanted to change the look of your MySpace profile you had to learn to code. Alternatively you could find a code you liked, and there were websites that had backgrounds or photo repeating software that would convert to a code you could copy. Paste. All the coolest kids did their own though, and you could definitely tell the difference. Back in my day, the save button was called a floppy disk, and yes, I've held on to it, so if anyone needs to install their mouse driver for a Napoli, I've got you covered. Somewhat ironically, this isn't a true original floppy disk either. Back in my day you couldn't just watch a whole cartoon series whenever you wanted. The cartoon played at a specific date and time, and if you didn't know how to program a VCR or have a blank cassette, you didn't get to watch it or had to hope it would show up on a random rerun instead of that one episode you've already seen 8 times. That meant the storytelling tended to be more repetitive and self-contained, since it's pretty common to not have seen a lot of episodes. I teach 5th grade, so I have back in my day moments on a near daily basis. A few of the regulars. Wikipedia is a take on the word encyclopedia, which is how we looked up basic information in my day. We didn't have Amazon, but we did have the Sears Holiday Catalog. GPS wasn't much of a thing, so you had to have the physical maps of the states or regions you were visiting to know where you were going. Before streaming, there were MP3s, then CDs, then tapes, and so on. Same goes for DVDs and VHS. TVs didn't always have remotes, and at one point it was common for them to only have a handful of available stations. No YouTube or other playback services. Shows, movies, or sporting events could be missed and you wouldn't have a chance to go back and see it. The cool thing is many 5th graders today are still familiar with a lot of those things. More often, they know of the idea but are short on the details, so it's still a learning moment. For example, Many of them knew about rotary phones this year but didn't understand how dialing worked with them. I could buy loose candies for 1 cent each at a dollar store, candy store, convenience store, think cherry blasters, Swedish berries, etc. Gum or bigger candies for 5 cents, double bubble, fuzzy peach, Bigfoot, Twizzlers, all individual /5c each, pennies, 1 cent coin. Don't even exist in my country now, Canada. As a young kid, having $5 could get me a full meal at local eateries and even fast food places, and still have money left over. McDonald's served 2 full combos, meals for $6.99. Pizza slices were $1.23. School pizza lunch was 2 slices and a drink for $3. Small subs were $1.23. I remember getting fries and gravy from a few places as a kid and it was always $2.00, $2.50 taxes incorporated. This same kind of purchasing power is now $15, $20 depending on where you live and what place you want to eat at. Many standard, non-discount menu, fast food place combos are well over $10 pre-tax now. Many cost right near $15 after tax. I was born and raised in Toronto, lived here all my life. Let me tell you, as a kid, it used to solidly snow from November through March in Toronto. Some Halloweens even had snow on the ground. But as kids, you bundle up and get your free candy. You gaff, mitts, scarves, snow pants, whatever it took. There was constantly snow on the ground in the winter season. Schools in the city, actual city, sorry 905ers, your school boards hand out snow days like candy, and still do, actually shut down. I remember listening to the radio or watching TV to get school closure info before I went to school, praying for closures like every other kid. It took Herculean snow to get the Toronto boards to shut schools. Hell, Toronto even called in the military in the 90s. https://www.cbc.ca/archives/ when Toronto declared war on snow and called in the Army 1.495060. One time we had so much snow. TLDR, we had snow days as young kids. I don't think Toronto boards have had one since the turn of the millennium. Now we get only a couple snowfalls a year, and they are in late January, early February. This past decade has really seen a change in the later years in terms of reduced snowfall. I bought a single bag of ice salt this year, regular size bag. I didn't even finish it this year, have like 40% left. Climate change emo. E-typos. E2. Found an article looking back on the military being called in re-snow. Edit 3 late edition. This one is for my fellow Canadians. I remember when pizza was actually good major chain pizza, not the cardboard in disguise that it has devolved into over the past decades. Also pogs were a big thing in the early 90s. Back in my day, if you wanted to learn about something that nobody in your family or friend group knew about, you had to go to a library and ask a librarian if they had a book on the subject. You could also use expensive encyclopedias, and hope the topic you wanted to learn about was in it. Detailed websites didn't exist, and the internet wasn't a widely accessible tool in every household. Also, you couldn't call or text your friends individually if you wanted to hang out. You had to call their home number, and then ask their parents if you could speak with them, as their parents would often be the ones who answered the home phone. Same thing with calling GFS, BFS or prospective love interests. Nice and awkward. Back in my day, if you wanted an affordable collection of your favorite songs, you spent an afternoon sitting by the radio with a blank cassette tape loaded and hit record when your favorite songs were played. Back in my day, if you wanted to ask a girl out, you had to call her at home and ran the risk of having to talk to mom, dad, older brother, etc. Younger friends were confused as to why I had ended up talking to her father. They had never had that problem as they had only ever communicated over cell phones. I keep hearing about Zoomers canceling skinny jeans and all I can think about are the fucking jankos we used to wear and how disgusting and sopping wet they got every time it rained. The Zoomers are proud to look at 20 the way we were embarrassed to look at 12. T9 texting or analog texting. I was so fast, I could text under my desk without looking, just by remembering where the buttons were. And there was no auto-correct or predictive text. You had to press some buttons 4 times just to get to the letter you wanted. These kids will never know. I had to be in front of the TV at the same time every weekday afternoon to see the next rerun episode of whatever show, Avatar: The Next Airbender, Saddle Club, Degrassi, etc., or else that episode was gone until the entire show finished and started back over many weeks later. This was made difficult by siblings who were emphatically skeptical of my TV show choices. Back in my day, you could only use your phone if it was plugged into the wall, not just any wall, your own wall, and it could only make calls, it couldn't text or use the internet on it. In fact, no one in the house could use the internet if someone was using the phone. Back in my day, if we wanted to rewatch a movie we had to put the tape in a rewinder and wait forever for it to go to the beginning. Also, if you missed an episode of a show you had to wait for it to be aired again, assuming it ever did. Back in my day, there were house hippos. My brother, 18, had never even heard of them before I mentioned it to him. Note: for those of you not from Canada, it was a commercial put on to say don't believe everything you see on TV by the government. When I was your age, we had to set a time to meet and a spot to meet up and just hope that the other person shows up. We couldn't call on a cell phone or text. My mom would drop me and my friends off at the mall and we better be back at the entrance by a certain time or all hell will break loose. LOL, or even worse, get paged overhead somewhere. Back in my day, our nostalgia filters were always hand-me-downs. You didn't get to have your own back in my day. You had to earn it. Until you did, you were only allowed to use Dad's yearning for a time that never was, and only on Sundays when everyone was in church. If you wanted to listen to an album, you had to get your mom to drive you to Tower Records and pay for it. Kazaa was a revelation because now you could spend an hour downloading a song to help you decide if the album was worth buying. I told all this to a young person on Twitter and it blew their mind. Until about 6 or 7 years ago, hard alcohol could only be purchased at state-run liquor stores. You could get beer and wine at the grocery store or gas station, but nothing over like 14% alcohol or something like that. So if one friend was of legal drinking age, only they could go inside to peruse and buy. Maybe they're too stupid or the pandemic is really fucking with them, but the gaggle of minors tagging along with the friend who's been 21 for 3 days are pissing me off. No, I won't sell 6 bottles of vodka to a group of 4 when only one of you has any. When I got my driver's license, GPS units were expensive and phones weren't smart and didn't have them yet. If you weren't super familiar with your city, it could be difficult to find things and you just had to accept spending a little time figuring out where you were. Back in my day, when I was a kid, I did not have any access to the internet. None. Neither did any of my friends. That's right, folks. I remember a time before the internet was commercially available to the public at large. Back in my day, we had ringtones that the caller heard. I forget what the actual name was, Ringback. But I remember I had a song by Whale as mine. Innocent times. My son is 6, and gets irritated at the 90 seconds of commercials on Hulu. Oh, my child. Back in my day, My mom had to tell me to get off the internet so she could make a phone call. I didn't have a phone with a camera until I was in high school. If we wanted to watch something on TV but didn't have the time when it aired, we had to set up the VHS player to record it on a blank tape. They tried to make purple and green ketchup a thing. If you wanted to buy marijuana, you had to call someone up and either meet them somewhere or wait for them for like 5 hours. Also, your entire life could be ruined if you were caught. Now you can buy it in a store and they sell CBD stuff in gas stations. When I was in college, I wanted to have How We Do as my ringtone, but I didn't want to pay for it, so I pulled up the song on YouTube and recorded a snippet and then used that as my ringtone. Nowadays I keep my phone on Do Not Disturb at all times, and I haven't actually used the ringtone in a decade. MySpace wasn't as personal as Facebook, and all messages were like emails versus chat boxes. You had to check your inbox for messages, and most of the stuff you saw were bulletins your friends posted, most of which was chain mail and surveys that were copy-pasted. If you wanted to change the look of your MySpace profile, you had to learn to code. Alternatively, you could find a code you liked, and there were websites that had backgrounds or photo repeating software that would convert to a code you could copy-paste. All the coolest kids did their own though, and you could definitely tell the difference. Back in my day, the save button was called a floppy disk, and yes, I've held on to it, so if anyone needs to install their mouse driver for an Apple, I've got you covered. Somewhat ironically, this isn't a true original floppy disk either. Back in my day, you couldn't just watch a whole cartoon series whenever you wanted. The cartoon played at a specific date and time, and if you didn't know how to program a VCR or a blank cassette, you didn't get to watch it or had to hope it would show up on a random rerun instead of that one episode you've already seen 8 times. That meant the storytelling tended to be more repetitive and self-contained, since it's pretty common to not have seen a lot of episodes. First time I saw someone take a selfie with a flip phone, there was only an outward-facing camera. You just had to aim it at yourself and hope for the best. Kids these days don't know how good they have it. When I was in college, I wanted to have How We Do as my ringtone, but I didn't want to pay for it, so I pulled up the song on YouTube and recorded a snippet and then used that as my ringtone. Nowadays I keep my phone on Do Not Disturb at all times, and I haven't actually used the ringtone in a decade. MySpace wasn't as personal as Facebook, and all messages were like emails versus chat boxes. You had to check your inbox for messages, and most of the stuff you saw were bulletins your friends posted, most of which was chain mail and surveys that were copy-pasted. If you wanted to change the look of your MySpace profile, you had to learn to code. Alternatively, you could find a code you liked, and there were websites that had backgrounds or photo repeating software that would convert to a code you could copy-paste. All the coolest kids did their own though, and you could definitely tell the difference. Back in my day, the save button was called a floppy disk, and yes, I've held on to it, so if anyone needs to install their mouse driver for an Apple, I've got you covered. Somewhat ironically, this isn't a true original floppy disk either. Once ate a pudding made of vegetables in my school cafeteria. That thing looked like green goo put together with some cooked eggs and slime. I swear I tried to eat that thing and ended up gagging every time I took a bite. I can't even remember its flavor, but it was bad, so that vegetable pudding was definitely made with hate, or maybe school cafeteria's food in general. Potato chips were supposedly invented out of spite. Supposedly the story goes some rich guy kept complaining that the cook, a guy named George Crumb, kept messing up the potatoes he was serving. So George sliced the potatoes really thin, fried them to a crisp, and salted them. The customer loved them and other customers started ordering potatoes that way. When I was 8, I used to eat cucumbers daily, and my sister knew this, and she despised me for stealing her parents away from her. Lady, we're siblings. The hell are you talking about? ? So she cut out the middle of the entire cucumber, filled it with chili powder, told my mom I'll give him his cucumbers today, and force-fed me the cucumber. 10/10 worst experience.